to Everything's Cleaner in Texas, the show where we spotlight the people, processes, and products that are helping Texas clean freaks fight dirty better. From hospital sterilization teams to cutting-edge technology, from deep cleaning secrets to industry game changers, if it's making Texas fight dirty, we're going to talk about it on this show. My name's Hank Balch, alongside Dusty Glass, and every episode we'll be diving deep with the experts, innovators, and frontline fighters who are setting the gold standard for cleanliness across the Lone Star State. Because in Texas, we don't just fight dirty, we do it big. So grab your boots, buckle up, it's time to get clean. What's up, sterile processing universe in particular? You sterile processing Texans out there. Hey, my name's Hank Balch. I'm one of the hosts on this new show, Everything's Cleaner in Texas. And I'm joined today with my illustrious co-host, Dusty Glass. Welcome to the show. Episode 1, buddy. We made it.
Yeah, thanks, Hank. It's awesome to be here.
So episode 1 is titled Don't Mess with Texas, the big vision for chapter education. And, you know, for those who are maybe not from Texas originally or weren't here in the 80s and 90s, Don't Mess with Texas was the big anti-littering campaign, like all over the television and newspapers. That was the ads. We still got some signs out there, Don't Mess with Texas. So, you know, that's about not littering. Well, we're going to take that into the sterile processing context as we kick off this vision for the show. Some big things that are happening down here in the state, in education and networking and opportunity for growth. A lot's happening, including this very podcast that folks are listening to today. So I don't want to go too much further because this podcast is coming out of a chapter launch. And so, Dusty, if you would maybe start us off here and talk to us about the chapter that is growing and launching right now. I guess it's already launched down in Houston. And give us a little background, and then we'll jump off from there on, you know, what the vision is for this show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Hank. I'm not originally from Texas. My wife is, and she brought us down here, and I am thankful for her every day. She always knows best, as always. When I got down here, working into the medical center in Houston, Texas, the rare air that you walk around with the legends of healthcare, no matter who, what, when, where, or why, the legends here that started some of the greatest things that have happened in healthcare started here in the medical center in Houston, Texas. So for me, when I found out that we didn't have our own chapter or that it had fell to the wayside, I just couldn't. I couldn't stand for that. I couldn't.
This will not stand, man.
Yeah, it will not stand. And I got together with some great folks, some people who are really passionate about they want the chapters to succeed. And we have so many great facilities, so many great technicians in the area, in the greater Houston area, that for them not to have a home locally, I felt was a travesty, and I had to do something about it. I had to. So, we have been on a mission to really get that out amongst everyone, to really say, hey, you have a home now. It's been a long time. You have a home where you can come, you can fellowship, you can grow as an individual. A lot of folks, we don't talk about it anymore, right? The big push when I was in learning was, hey, let's get certified, and then what? You got that T-shirt, and then it was like, well, then what? But for us in the chapter, it's not only certification, it's not only CEUs that we want to bring you. It's how do we get you to the next level? No matter what that level is, how do we get you to the next level? If you're a supervisor, how do we get you to a manager? If you're a manager, how do we get you to a director? If you're a director, how do we get you to AVP? If you're an AVP, How do we get you further than that? Let's start out your own company, your own business, right? Whatever that looks like for that individual, we believe in growth, no matter professional development, in whatever that looks like for any of our members or any of the folks here in Houston, Texas. So that's kind of a little bit on why we wanted to get it started back up. And when I was sent the list of all the certified technicians here in Houston, over 1,400 members in the HSPA, 1,400, and that is only in this area. And I was like, it was just validating. It was validated that this needed to happen and that we had to get those folks somewhere where they can get plugged in.
Now, before we go into the vision for the podcast here, I know the territory boundaries for these chapters are a little blurry at times. And so, like, this is a Houston chapter. Like the name of the chapter has Houston in the name, right? So that's the epicenter of the chapter, but it spreads out. Houston is its own city, but then it's surrounded, the sprawl includes a lot of other like towns and cities that don't have the name Houston in the town name. And yet, the reach for this chapter is pretty broad. So like right now, how are you explaining like who can come and be a part of what's happening right now with the chapter launch?
It's a really great question, Hank. I just had to answer that question this weekend. We had a big fall seminar. And we had some folks from Dallas there. They came in and they were like, wow, we want to be a part of this. This is fantastic.
I mean, y'all put on some smoking seminars, I'll tell you. It's pretty good.
I will say, not only do you not want to mess with Texas, but everything is bigger in Texas.
It's bigger.
Okay? that is a fact. The way I kind of describe it, almost the way I told it this weekend was, it's almost like we can sing a country music song about our region, from College Station to the seas of the Gulf of Galveston, down to the peaks of close to San Antonio. That this is, we cover a huge area. And what I would say is that if you feel it, chase it. Right? If you feel like you're close to us, come on, we will accept you here in the Houston area. We have a lot of mileage. We don't want to take from any other chapter, but there are already talks of becoming a state of Texas chapter already. So, there are obviously preliminary talks where we would just be, Houston, the area, Dallas, the satellite area, San Antonio, the satellite area. We are excited to have anyone that is close to the Houston area join us.
All right. Love it. Tremendous activities going on, right now. This is 2024 at the time of the recording of this episode 1 for the podcast. In 2024, obviously, this is kind of the relaunch year. You got I forget what it's called, not your certification, but kind of your marching orders from HSPA that said you're official. And you got a lot of activities that we're going to be talking about that, through the show, through all the episodes in the show, try to get folks update, how to get plugged in and involved. But one of the exciting things, just, me personally, I am from Texas, grew up in Texas, went to college in Texas, started my career in sterile processing in Kentucky, then came back to Texas as a director down in San Antonio. I'll get into that story here in a little bit. But, when we moved, my family and I moved to College Station, which is within striking distance of Houston. And when we moved down here last summer, one of the first things I did was I reached out to you guys down in Houston because I knew you've got tremendous vision for education, very passionate folks that are kind of rallying around the flag and saying, hey, because of all the legends and all the heroes of healthcare that are in the air down there, it makes sense, for us to do something big. Well, out of those conversations came this conversation about this podcast, actually. And I knew you guys love education. I'm not good at a lot of things, but one of the things I've gotten a little bit better on in the years is podcasting. And so I said, you know what? Wouldn't it be interesting if we brought these two things together? A chapter that's on fire to do something big in the industry and the skills of podcasting and just the fun that we can put together through the Beyond Clean network to do something that would be new, that would hopefully be inspiring, that would be challenging to the industry around us. It would be educational, obviously not just for the members of the chapter, not even just for Houston, not even just for Texas, even though it is a Texas podcast about sterile processing, but the whole world. I know before we started recording just now, Dusty and I were talking about, hey, we're going to have folks that are tuning in from around the globe on this show, listening to two guys talk about what's going on in the sterile processing neck of the woods in Texas. It's kind of crazy to imagine, that's going to happen. But yeah, that was the vision for this podcast, to really say, hey, there's tremendous people already coming to this chapter events, already working in hospitals across the state of Texas, caring for patients, fighting dirty. They've all got awesome stories to tell. They've all got passion to share. Even though you can do a lot of that at your normal chapter events and through all kinds of great, networking opportunities, the podcasting space is just right there for the taking. And so I guess the last, I don't know, Dusty, it's like 5-6 months. I don't even know if it's been that long, but we've kind of been batting this idea around. And this fall, we've got a couple of other folks excited about it. We got our initial launch sponsor together to get this baby off the ground. And so we're not looking back. We're launching the Everything's Cleaner in Texas podcast. And we're launching it primarily, again, as a tool for this Houston chapter to equip its members, inspire other folks in Texas, and, lead out as kind of a thought leader in the entire industry in sterile processing for how you could use podcasting to do these things for your chapter in your area, for your membership and beyond. So that's the vision for the show. I know we kind of jumped in a little bit on the introduction to the chapter, but obviously a lot of you guys may not be familiar with who Dusty is. And I want to give you a quick intro, Dusty, before I let you give us a little background about yourself. But the first time I met Dusty, you would have fooled me by saying that you're not from Texas, because I walk up to this guy and he's got a 10-gallon cowboy hat on, not really 10-gallon, but like a Stetson-looking cowboy hat on. He's got the cowboy boots. I mean, this guy looks the part. Like, you might even have the big belt buckle. I don't remember, but I'm like, man, this is my guy right here. Like, we're Texas brothers. Like, he looks more Texan than I do these days. And so, yeah, when I found out that you weren't from Texas, but you got here as quick as you could, I'm like, okay, this guy's drinking the water, man. You're fitting in.
Yeah, it's so funny, Hank, that you say that, because I'm a Kentucky boy. I was born and raised in Kentucky. I had the opportunity to serve our country as a combat medic. It was wonderful, wonderful 7 years of my life that I was able to serve the country, deploy to multiple different combat areas. And when I came back, I was kind of in a dark place, honestly. It was really hard. Had, the family, newborns, and a wife in school. And, we were really kind of trying to figure out, well, what's next? What do we want to do? Nashville for me at that time was a short drive. So started out in TriStar Centennial, HCA, their flagship down there in Nashville.
Okay.
And
I know some folks out there.
Yeah, I was there for a long time. I want to say 5.5 years spent there. The wonderful thing about me and my journey, and I say that as a journey because I've had to fight. I've had to claw and work for, I feel like, everything that.
Not literally fighting, right? Like, we're not talking about that you pull people in the parking lot after work and said, we're going to make this happen, right?
If it wasn't for my wife, maybe.
Okay.
She saves me every day. That's for sure.
Now, did you start at TriStar, not to interrupt you, but did you start as a sterile processing technician? Was that your first role? Coming to the hospital environment?
Actually, no. I started off as an OR attendant, actually. I started off, I came out as an EMT, did that for a little bit, and I didn't like the call schedule, 24/48. My wife said that she felt like I was deployed all over again. And
yeah, just like with the pay's not as good, though, right?
Exactly. I just wanted to get my foot in the door, in the hospital, and I spent about 3 months as an OR attendant, and I was doing turnovers. I was taking trays into sterile process, and I didn't know what they were. I just, I was told take this tray here. That it needs to be turned over, it needs to be sterile, and I was intrigued. I was like, oh, okay, well, what's going on over here? What are these? This process intrigued me because we had done the same kind of process in the Army. As combat medics, you do everything. So we didn't have all of these support. It was you. You were the support. You were the scrub. You were the nurse. You were whatever you needed to be. And so I was like, hey, I actually know how to do a lot of that stuff, or so I thought. Right. So, I went and talked to them and I said, hey, is this, do y'all have any openings? Is there any kind of things that we can do here? And of course, started off second shift. They said, of course, we have something open in second shift. Started off as a technician, worked as a technician for a while. I want to say about 6 to 8 months. And I got promoted to a supervisor. Worked as a supervisor, took over, as a night weekend, because we never had anybody that worked the night shift. Did that for about 2 or 3 years and made it up to supervisor, and eventually had to kind of step away from Centennial, stepped out to be a traveler. And that's where I got my first chance in management as a traveling sterile processing supervisor. That quickly turned into an assistant manager position as a traveler, manager, and it took off. I did traveling for another 4.5 years until I settled down in Knoxville, Tennessee, and was there for a couple years. And then my wife said, honey, I'm ready to go home to Texas. And I said, you've never steered me wrong so far, so let's do it. We got this position here in Texas and we haven't looked back. So, we've been blessed, and I feel like I've always been in Texas, honestly. The way of life, the kind of morals, the kind of, just thought process, and the kind of people that you meet and you deal with, it's very similar. So, I just fit right in.
Yeah. So what year did you come back to Texas? Just so we got that timeline.
So,
come to Texas, I guess.
I came to Texas March of 23.
Okay, 23.
I think I first met you. It's funny, is because it was kind of a complete circle for me. I won the SPD Quality Award, which is where I met you in Nashville. Won that for my work in Knoxville, and I had just accepted the position down in Texas. And that was kind of what spurred the wardrobe, because my wife, like I said, she always takes care of me and makes sure that I am dressed the part.
That's right. She knew what you needed, huh?
She did.
That's great. So you come to Texas in 23, and as you've kind of alluded to, at that time there wasn't a chapter that was active. And as you kind of told us earlier in the intro to the chapter, almost immediately you're like, nah, this ain't going to work, guys. We need it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a chapter actually that wasn't active a lot before then. I think they had said that really COVID had really been hard
as
on
it
the
did
chapter.
A lot of chapters. Yep.
Yeah. But HSPA had already kind of removed all of, they hadn't recertified. So I guess the members that were there just said, hey, we're not going to be able to keep it up. We're just going to go ahead and let it lapse. Like I said, for me, obviously it takes a lot. It takes a lot of personal time. It takes a lot. I don't get paid for these things. I don't ask for money. I don't ask for any of those things. My time is a gift, and it is a gift to the profession. Because I remember those days and those nights, those long nights in Tennessee at HCA, which is, it's a whole nother story. But I remember that I wish someone had been there to be able to guide me and give me direction and quench my thirst. Because what I would say, a lot of our folks here, they're hungry. They're thirsty to grow, to be better, to learn everything that they can learn. And they just want to be pointed in a direction on, show me how, put me in, coach. And I want to be able to be that for somebody. I've shared this with you, it's really surreal because I remember, I had a long drive from Kentucky to Tennessee every night. I had a hour-long drive. I filled my commutes with Beyond Clean. That is what I listened to. And, so for me, the full circle of, just trying to make it home every day and still learn and still quench that thirst that I have for knowledge. And then now sitting here with the man, the myth, and the legend in person it's quite humbling.
It's crazy, man. I'll tell you, the experience that I've had, and maybe I guess this is as good time as any to give a quick little bio, for anyone who doesn't know me and the journey, but your journey and that surrealness is felt by everybody, right? Like even those of us on the inside of Beyond Clean, it's like we got a small team. But if you were to ask any of us, 10 years ago, would we have this podcast and this network and this influence and this inspiration, for an industry? Like 10 years ago, this is 2024, that was 2014. I might have still been a manager at that time at a department in Kentucky. Like I loved the industry already by then. I loved the opportunity to lead people. I saw the tremendous potential, but I also was like, I'm just a manager of just a random department in this huge country, a huge health system. We're part of CHI in this huge industry and huge world. And just I'm going to do what I'm going to do, but then I'm going to be done and that's going to be it, kind of thing. I would have never dreamed that we'd be doing what we're doing today as a part of Beyond Clean, or that I would have had the opportunity to go to places I've gone, to speak to the people that I've spoken to, and to launch the awesome kinds of projects like this one right now, that can just have so much potential impact on, real people. And every real person that we impact has an impact on real patients, because they're the ones at the end of our surgical instruments. And, the humble, the surrealness, the crazy, unbelievableness, I share it as well. So real quick, I did an undergraduate program in agriculture. I graduated, went to seminary, actually got a degree in theology, went on to law school after that, did a year and a half of law school before I realized that I didn't have the brain probably to be an attorney, but I also just didn't have the desire to be an attorney. At that same time, though, kind of backtracking, about 2 years into my career in seminary, I needed a job that was kind of second shift that would pay the bills. And so I got a job at the Walmart as a second shift stocker, not a stalker, a stocker. So I was unloading the truck actually, and then, getting stuff on the shelves throughout the evening. And a buddy of mine got hired at this department in a hospital, and he told me it was sterile processing. They're hiring. You don't need any background in healthcare. And I was like, sign me up, buddy. This is one of my best friends who was working at Walmart. And I said, if you're going, take me with you. He ended up getting me a job. And it was great because it was second shift. It had a tuition reimbursement program that would help me a little bit with school. I worked every other weekend, was the weekend rotation. So if anybody's ever, you said that you kind of work night shift, but if you work second shift or night shift, you feel like in some seasons of life, you got no life because all your evenings are worked and every other weekend is work. And there was some seasons there where I feel like I never saw the sunset. It was just a weird thing when I was out randomly one evening not working. And I was like, that's what the sunset looks like. It's amazing. So I did that and then graduated, with that master's. And then I was still working in sterile processing while I was going to law school that first year and a half. And, when I quit law school, it lined up interestingly with my career. Our department manager had taken a job actually with an HCA facility down in Florida. I was not qualified for that role. I had no supervisory experience on my resume. I had only been in the industry at that point. That would have been 2013. I started 2009. So I had only had 4 years of experience. And the department, it was like 35, 40 people. So it wasn't like a little bitty department, but we had 3 shifts, had a good number of operating rooms, and threw my name in the hat. And I had a boss who believed in me, gave me a shot. And I'm going to spare you all the in between then and now, but to have a boss that is willing to take a risk on you if they see some potential there, changed my life, changed my career. I know it catapulted me in a direction that definitely ended up, leading to what we're doing now through Beyond Clean and other things like that. But I alluded to earlier when you mentioned San Antonio, I think the peaks of San Antonio might have been the phrase you threw out there. I took a director role in Kentucky first, and then I actually moved to Texas in 2016, I think. I had to take a director role at the University Health System down in San Antonio. And I got to San Antonio and had the same experience you had, Dusty, looking around thinking like, there's too many people here and there's not a chapter. I had also, before I left Kentucky, started a chapter up there. It was called the Kentuckiana chapter. So it's like Kentucky and Indiana. It had also had a chapter like a long time before that had died. And so we started it. We resurrected that. And then like 6 or 8 months later, I moved to go to Texas. And I was like, I just started this thing. Go to Texas, same experience. Hey, we don't have anything in San Antonio. Let's start the South Texas Association for Sterile Processing Professionals. And that launched again like 2016, 2017. And then about a year later, I started Beyond Clean and left San Antonio. So coming back, long story short, coming back here for this Houston show, I get an up close kind of front row seat. I ain't moving anytime soon, Dusty. Don't worry about that. We're dying in this house that I just bought. So it has been really, really cool, though, to see these launches up close and personal and, see exactly what you mentioned. It takes an army and a village to launch these things, to keep them going, to keep the excitement going, to keep it creative, especially today's world where there's so many different distractions, in our industry for our technicians and our membership. So that vision is fed into, obviously like your story about the launch of the chapter and then my story about kind of bringing this podcast here together. But it highlights something that you were kind of just touching on before I went into my spiel about the challenges that our technicians, our educators, and our leaders are facing today in getting educated themselves, giving education to their peers or to their employees, and just getting it to stick in the way that, good education does. I wonder if you have any thoughts on that in the context of what we're trying to do, obviously, through the show.
I'll go personal a little bit. Hank, one of the biggest things that I experienced personally with my coworkers when I first got into this industry, I heard a lot of, why would I get certified? I'm not going to make any more money. My paycheck doesn't change. Why would you do that? So I had to sit there and look at myself and go, well, okay, well, why do I want to do that? Right. And I had to sit there and kind of weigh and say, well, do I really want to spend $150 to go take this test? Do I really want to buy a book? Do I really want to do this? What if, I had to rationalize it with myself to find out, like, what's your reasoning, Dusty? Why? Right? Because you hear those voices of like, well, your paycheck doesn't change when you get that certification. You could get 2, you could get 3, you get 4. It's going to stay the same. I actually became the first one in my hospital at that time to be certified. Didn't make any more money. They were right. They were absolutely right.
Yeah, right.
I didn't make $1 more, but I made more from the knowledge that I gained. And that's something you can't take away from me. That power that I have to know what right is and what wrong is. And I would say that knowledge that I gained led me to then continue to make those decisions to move forward and get my CER, my CIS, my CHL. And those didn't raise my paycheck $1 either. But what it did was it built an internal fortitude for myself, right? That gave me the confidence to know that I do know what I'm talking about. I do have the answers that are uniquely mine. There may be some MDs, right? There may be some folks that they are subject matter experts in their area, and I'll give them kudos to their area. But in my realm, right, I'm the subject matter expert. And that's what I think that when you empower technicians to change the lens, right, of how I'm going to look at it rather than a dollar sign or, in the beginning, rather than chasing the dollar sign, chase that power of knowledge, right? Because once you have that, that is the key to then start looking at other things like, hey, now I want to look at my resume. Now I want to see, am I eligible for some of those leadership roles? Am I eligible to now continue down other paths? It is a door that once you open, there are so many doors to then walk through after you do that. But if you never open that first door, you're absolutely right. You're going to stay right where you're at. And that's, we're better. We have more than that. We have more to offer. Our profession has more to offer, and it's hungry for subject matter experts in sterile processing. This is critical that our area not only in a respect, but in a patient's safety. It is, besides some of the actual things that are happening in the room, we directly impact that care of whether that patient is getting an infection or they have a positive outcome. And once you have that knowledge, that is the power.
Yeah, I think the story that you shared, if we were to categorize that as a particular challenge, it highlights the peer pressure challenge, the anti-education mindset out there, if it's not tied to compensation. And I know we'll have some folks tuning in. It's like, hey, I did actually get a raise when I got certified, which is great. And that's kind of a newer trend, that has happened more and more as we get more leaders that believe in this education mindset you just described, Dusty, who are able to advocate, for that in their facilities or health systems, So yeah, kudos if you're getting more money for your credentials. But to your point, if that's the reason that you're doing it, you may not actually be experiencing all the value of that process itself because you're missing the fact that, hey, it does give you this power to utilize this knowledge then to do better and to care more safely, to fight dirty better. We're going to use that phrase. And then the other word, I don't think you said this, but I heard this loud and clear in your description, is the word confidence. Because as you get these credentials, that confidence grows in your ability to do your job excellently, but then also your ability to continue learning. And I know this whole show is going to be tilted toward CEs. We're going to have it approved for CE credits for members of the chapter. And so that piece is going to be there, but continuing education doesn't have to have a CE approved marker on it. It just means you're continuing to learn. It can be a book. It can be a conversation. It can be just a day in the department. That kind of continuous learning is what this industry is all about. And if you're not doing it, you're just going to get passed by because it's moving too quickly. I wanted to bring up another question here for you, and this kind of goes back to the chapter piece. It's that technician who feels not connected. And, maybe I got to think this is true even in larger departments, but it's definitely true in like smaller ASCs where maybe, hey, there's one tech or two techs, and you just see that other tech when you're clocking in and clocking out in the hallway on the way as you're switching shifts. It can feel really isolating out there in those small departments or in a big department that, where you feel like I am the only one that values this education piece, or I am the only one who really cares about not cutting corners or, doing this right. And then you just feel like, am I crazy? Like, am I going too far? Is it just not that important like everybody else is saying? How has education, or, maybe even how can education come alongside that tech, Dusty, and say, hey, you're not alone?
So I was taught this. I think it rings true to this. Iron sharpens iron. And I think when you take that initiative and you're like, hey, you know what? Maybe I am. Maybe I want to learn these things. I don't want to cut corners. I want to challenge myself. Getting out there and meeting others, right? Meeting others that may be in the same situation you are, right? The same things. That's some of the things the chapter offers, is that, able to bring a safe gathering place for like minds, or people who are in the same predicament, the same work hours, the same weekend grind, the same night grind, the same, level 1 trauma grind, and to kind of say, oh, okay, well, how are you doing? How is everything here? What are y'all doing? Sharing ideas. I find that is one of we recreate the wheel so many times because we don't want to talk to each other, and I feel like we need this open relationship where we can not recreate the wheel of, if you've already come up with a really great process, let's just, say that you're dealing with, orthopedic trays, and, you're a small surgery center and they just do orthopedic trays, and you have a really great idea. I want to hear about it, right? I want to hear how you do it, and see if we can implement it in our facility and increase productivity, increase, technicians actually liking their job and enjoying it, right? And having some type of work-life balance, as we call it. Those are the things that can percolate, when you have that open dialogue and a place to go. And that's what I hope that this chapter kind of promotes, because for me, I don't stand under a particular banner of, this facility, that facility. I stand under the patient banner. That is really, it's my heart. And I feel like if you have a great idea, I want to hear it. I want to listen to it. And, I feel like the same thing. If we have really great ideas, I feel like it will, they'll speak for themselves.
Yeah. I don't know if you said this word too, but the networking concept, is thrown out a lot. Like, we talk about the value of networking. I know when I was in school, in my undergrad, like, all the professors like network. Well, you may or may not believe this, Dusty, but I'm kind of an introvert, or I'm like an ambivert or something. Like, I don't know what they call that, but like, speaking to people, especially people that I don't know, off the fly stresses me out. And like, I try to find ways not to do that. It's just awkward. And I've gotten better over time, right? But like, I don't necessarily seek that out. But what you're talking about with this chapter environment and getting to know these people, that they're not strangers, and that you're seeing them at the meetings, you're seeing them at the seminars, you're talking through the chat functions on the forum, like maybe even like you're listening to their voices on the podcast, like just like this, that reduces that networking stress. Because I'll tell you, the higher up the food chain you get in the industry or in healthcare, if you're wanting to grow in that way vertically, like into leadership, or if you want to be a consultant, if you want to work with a vendor someday, whatever. I mean, networking is critical, absolutely critical. You want these people to know who you are before you put your application on their desk. That's how you get to the top of the pile, or that's how you get the job in the invisible job market. And that's the market that people get hired before the job is even posted. You don't get that if you're not networking. And so, yeah, if you're looking for best practices, like Dusty said, if you're just looking for like some camaraderie with people who know what it feels like to work the night shift in SPD or whatever, there's value. But then there's also value in this networking piece for any kind of career growth opportunities, especially because we're all located in this same environment in the greater Houston area, in the Texas area. Like, people do move around, and your network moves with them. If you know Johnny and he moves to San Antonio, great. Now you got network in San Antonio, and that's how this happens over the course of your career. Okay, Dusty. So we have gone already now 45 minutes. So I'm going to start bringing this plane in for a landing. But I told you before we started, I said I wouldn't be surprised if we're still talking 45 minutes in here. You and I know, the listener doesn't know this yet, but you and I know that we've got just a blockbuster blowout season plan for this season 1 of this show. We've got some great ideas, talking to some terrific folks about all kinds of different topics and trends that are impacting Houston and Texas and the industry at large. Is there any particular topic that you want to kind of tease for the audience today? Just kind of let them know what we got in store for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things people don't really think about is who's doing your instrument repairs? What are they doing? How are they doing it? A lot of people.
I mean, like literally, like who is the person doing it? Not necessarily like who's the company, but you're saying like who is that person
in the van?
Are
they, what is happening?
True.
I think that there's so many unanswered questions that if you go and ask your normal technician on the floor, how does this get serviced? How does this get taken care of? And then really diving into the man in the truck, right? The no matter what banner you're in, right? The man in the truck, right? What are they doing? I want to know. I'm inquisitive. I think that a lot of times it's an underlying issue people don't realize that causes, your surgeons to be unhappy, and ultimately causes, some patient care, patient safety things. And, it's something that it's not getting talked about a lot. And so that's something that I think that people will be pleasantly surprised about when we dive into it.
Yeah, that's one of the many things I like about doing these kind of shows is if you got a question like that you're personally curious about, well, let's do an episode on it because I want to know too. I want to ask those questions and get those answers myself. I know we also talked about one of the themes or one of the topics that we're going to cover, and this may end up being multiple episodes, but we want to talk to some larger facilities about, big facility challenges. And we want to talk to some small facilities about some small facilities challenges. If you've never worked in one of those environments, you could have this conception about what it's like and how awesome it is not to work weekends at the surgery center, or, how great it is to always have new stuff to do every day at a level 1 trauma facility. But there's a reality in there somewhere that we're looking forward to digging into here in Texas and talking to some folks about, what those experiences are and everything in between. We're going to have thought leaders, subject matter experts, clinicians. We're going to have some vendors coming in. There's going to be a diversity of insight and background and thoughts that are going to start telling this Texas story. And if you've listened to podcasting at all, if you've been a fan of the Beyond Clean podcast, this sterile processing story is much bigger than one episode. It's bigger than one show. It's bigger than one season. It's an ongoing story that changes every single day that we clock into SPDs around the state. But we want to just kind of open up the door a little bit on this show and say, hey, there's some big things going on in Texas, and it's definitely cleaner in Texas. Okay, so Dusty, as we wrap, if there are folks tuning in who are like, hey, I'm one of those 1,400 people that are on your list, Dusty, that's within striking distance to come and be a part of what's happening down in Houston, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you or to get involved in what's going on with the chapter?
The easiest way is, www.hsppachapter.com. That will have all of our links on it. It will have all of our membership. It'll have all of our sponsors. It'll have our bylaws. It'll have everything that you want to know about this chapter and what we're doing on there. It'll also have links to Sterile, which is kind of our messaging platform that can, connect you instantly to chapter members. All you have to do is search HSPPA and join, and, open up that conversation and kind of will help you to ease into meeting some of those local folks around. You can also always reach out to me. My information is on the website as well, personal cell phone. I'm more than happy to have those conversations and, get you where you need to be.
And that Sterile works with an So WORX.com for anyone who's not familiar with that. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on that networking platform, but definitely check out the group that Dusty mentioned to kind of coordinate and meet some folks online at least. If you're a vendor that's tuning in that has customers in Texas, maybe you're based in Texas and you want to support the mission of education, networking, and growth that Dusty has laid out that's tied to the chapter and even to the podcast, if you want to support the show that we're putting together here in future seasons or years down the road, we'd love to talk to you about that and help you get involved. I know there's seminars being planned, for the next couple of cycles. There's monthly meetings. There's all kinds of big dreams that are in plan. So we need all kinds of supporters on the clinical side. We need membership to support us, but we also need that innovator and the vendor side of the community to support us as well. So make sure and get plugged in with Dusty for more information on that. I'm going to wrap it there for episode 1, and I'm just going to let y'all know we got a great lineup of episodes to come, and depending on how we roll this show out, the next 2 episodes may already be ready on your podcast platform, Apple, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, iHeartRadio, you name it. Anywhere podcasts are heard, well, obviously coming out on the Beyond Clean network as well. But if you don't hear an episode or you don't hear a topic covered, we want to hear from you. So if there's something that, you're like, hey, somebody needs to talk about that, or this is an issue that's facing Texas in particular in the sterile processing space, please get connected to Dusty or myself, and we'd love to put that on a future episode of Everything's Cleaner in Texas. Dusty, thank you so much for helping us kick off this episode 1 and this project that who knows where it's going to take us and the chapter in the industry, but something tells me it's going to be good.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Hank. I appreciate it.
All right. If you loved today's conversation, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review, because this fight against bioburden is as big as Texas. If you've got a sterile processing tip, story, or even product that's making it easier for Texas clean freaks to fight dirty, we want to hear about it. Connect with us on social media anywhere you find Beyond Clean. That's Facebook, LinkedIn, X, and YouTube. Until next time, lasso up those dirty trays and saddle up those sterilizers, because we're about to show the world why everything's cleaner in Texas.